All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Adam Foster. I'm the Executive Director here at Texas Alliance Groundwater Districts, and I'm very happy that y'all are joining us today for our work session on correlative allocations. We are very pleased to be partnering with the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment and the Environmental Defense Fund, and we greatly appreciate their continued collaboration and their expertise that they bring to the conversations that we're having here at TAG. So very much appreciate that. Today's webinar is designed to help GCDs explore how correlative allocations approach might be applied within their own district or local area. As we all know, every district is extremely different, from the aquifers that they manage to the people that they are serving. So our goal today is not to prescribe one size fits all method, but rather to walk through different concepts and real world examples that can support your decision making back home. Many of you have probably seen Robert's recent report on this topic, and if you haven't had a chance to read it, we will be providing some information later on how to access it. I also want to take this moment to show appreciation to Robert for his work in this area and for helping move this conversation forward in a meaningful way. We're also very fortunate to have three district representatives with us today who have generously offered their time and expertise to help facilitate this discussion and offer their insights. First up, we have Kelly Cochran. She is the General Manager at Guadalupe County Groundwater Conservation District and my favorite parliamentarian. Second, we have Gary Westbrook, who is the General Manager of Post Oak Savannah GCD. And then lastly, joining us is Kevin Urbanzik, who is a board member at Brewster County GCD. And again, we are extremely grateful for them for contributing their time and perspectives to today's webinar. So a little outline of what we're going to be doing today. We'll start off with a refresher on correlative allocations led by Robert, followed by overviews from the three district representatives on how they are using correlative allocation frameworks within their districts. We'll then move on to an open discussion and Q&A session. This is going to be moderated by Vanessa when we'll be able to open it up to all the questions that you may have. And then finally, we'll hear from Robert again, and he will be going over some potential next steps for those of you that are interested in pursuing correlative allocations further. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording this session, and that is so that we can share it with the TAG members that aren't present today. We do want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable during the Q&A, and we want to facilitate an open discussion. So if you would prefer that we not share the open Q&A part, let us know, and then when we send that out, we'll not include that. Second, we have received a bunch of great questions ahead of time from all the registrants, and we are going to try our best to address some of those during the discussion, either during the actual, when we're talking about the individual districts, or at the end. But if you do have any additional questions that come up throughout the presentations, please use the chat feature, and we're going to be monitoring those. And so hopefully we can get to some of those questions if we've got the time. And with that, I just want to thank you all again for joining us today. We're hoping for some very enlightening and engaging conversation. And thanks for joining us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert.
Very good. Thank you, Adam, for the introduction, and also appreciation to Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts for hosting this webinar. We'll provide some links later, but we put out a report earlier this year called Coupled Correlative Allocations for Groundwater Management in Texas. And I'm just going to provide a very quick overview of this report. And then just note that the Hershey Foundation was the group that funded this work. They have a lot of interest in groundwater management. So we benefited from funding from them. We're grateful for that. Next slide. So, so what does correlative allocation or correlative rights mean? And in the simplest of application, the simplest form, and quite frankly, probably the most used application of the concept is correlating how much groundwater you can pump to the surface acreage over your property. So if you have 10 acres versus your neighbor who has 100 acres, oftentimes the neighbor with 100 acres will be able to produce 10 times the amount of water that you have. We commonly see a correlative allocation out in West Texas. I want to say my research showed it probably started in the Ogallala Aquifer, where you've got like 2 acre-foot per acre or 1.5 acre-feet per acre. Again, the most common and simplest way of applying it is simply, are you over the aquifer? How many acres do you have? We'll hear from Kelly later where they have added in a geologic component. It's not required, but it can certainly add greater sophistication of to a correlative allocation. Next slide. So in this study, what we looked was that there was about 60% of groundwater districts in Texas correlate maximum groundwater production to surface acreage. So again, that goes back to that 2 acre-foot per acre or 1 acre-foot per acre. That if somebody comes in for a permit to a district and they have 100 acres and the maximum correlation is 2 acre-foot per acre, well, then they're not going to be able to get a permit for more than 200 acre-feet per acre. Next, be the next bullet. There's a large range of what gets assigned across the state for those districts that do this. And it ranges from a very small amount, 0.04 acre-feet per acre per year, to a really high amount. And I put down here 90 acre-feet per acre per year. That is not common, but some of them are quite large. Next bullet. The median, so it's like half for bigger than this, half for less than this, is 1.5 acre-feet per year. 25% of the districts had a correlative allocation less than half an acre-foot per acre per year, and then 25% had an allocation greater than 3 acre-foot per year. Again, this is for the maximum groundwater production. Next bullet. And then 10% were greater than 8 acre-feet per year per acre. Next slide. One question that's popped up over the years as I've been thinking about and talking about correlative rights and correlative allocations is can you do this in a karst aquifer or a limestone aquifer? And the short answer is yes. The legislature actually did it with the Edwards Aquifer Authority with an allocation of 2 acre-foot per acre of irrigated agriculture when historic use permits were first granted. And if you question the ability of the legislature to decide if this is a good idea or not, there are a number of groundwater districts in the state that do use correlative allocations in limestone aquifers. So, the short answer is yes, you can do this in a limestone aquifer. Next slide. Now we've talked about maximum allocations, but one key aspect, and this popped up in some of the questions that were submitted as folks registered for this webinar, was, who has anybody correlated or used a correlative allocation with that then is tied back to the modeled available groundwater number and hence the desired feature condition? And the answer is yes, but not very many districts. So, out of the 59 districts that have a correlative allocation, scheme in their rules. Five of the districts actually connect their or couple their correlative allocations to the desired feature condition in the modeled available groundwater. And the three panelists you're going to hear from in a bit are three of those five. Next slide. There's some opportunities if a district chooses to do a correlative allocation approach. This does set a cap, so it makes it amenable to achieving the desired feature condition in as much as you believe your modeled available groundwater number. Districts are charged with achieving desired feature conditions. The MAG is the best estimate of how much you can pump to achieve that desired feature condition. And so a correlative allocation does set a cap. When you set a cap, it often creates a market. You're going to hear Kelly talk a little bit about that. When there's a cap and there's a market, it offers opportunities for conservation. You'll probably hear Gary talk about how that's working in his district. And this is a way, because there's a cap on the production, it is a way to achieve the desired feature condition. I'm not an attorney, but I'm like, is there a better defense in court? Because if every landowner has a defined right to the groundwater beneath their property, linked up with the desired feature condition, does kind of sound like a fair share. And in many ways, correlative allocations or correlative rights are employed in other parts of the country to achieve that fair share. Next slide. So I wanted to share the action figures. So I've got action figure for the Guadalupe County Groundwater Conservation District. Again, this is a district that is using a correlative allocation approach that you'll hear about shortly. There's a water code, the requisite plate of barbecue. There's a groundwater modeler in the lower right-hand corner. And the Bible, it's always good to have the Bible around, especially if you're in groundwater management. Next slide. And we've got the Gary Westbrook action figure, and he's got a groundwater modeler down there in the lower right-hand corner, but then also an attorney there over on his side. And oh yeah, there's a plate of barbecue. Next slide. And then here's the Kevin Urbanzik action figure for the Brewster County Groundwater Conservation District. So we've got an academic paper there because Dr. Urbanzik's associated with Sul Ross University. Got the water code. He's at least part geologist, so there has to be beer. There's a barbecue, and then
How did he get beer with his barbecue?
it's a geologist part. It's a geologist part. And then, he's got the canoes because he does spend a lot of time studying spring discharge in the Rio Grande on the kind of southern edge of many of the aquifers in the Edwards Trinity Plateau. So next slide. That might be my last slide. There we go. So with that, I will turn it back over to our moderator, Adam, to introduce the guest speakers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robert. All right, so now we will hear from each individual district on some of the approaches that they have taken, and hopefully that will illuminate some things for our audience. First up, we have Kelly Cochran. Kelly, it's all yours.
All right. Hi, everybody. You can just flip on to the next slide. That's just another cover slide and start with the map. All right, there. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, let's talk about Guadalupe County. We are a small district there. You can see on the map, we're just 435 square miles. That's about 61% of Guadalupe County. So we're a small GCD. The rest of the county is the Edwards Aquifer Authority, but only for the Edwards Aquifer. Our district was created in 97, and by 99, we had our confirmation election and started developing our rules. Our district manages the Carrizo and the Wilcox aquifers, and I'm going to talk about each one of those differently. You can switch to the Wilcox next slide, please. So because we've got two different aquifers, there's a confining layer between the two. So we manage them a little bit differently and permit them differently. The Wilcox underlies the Carrizo in our area, and it's predominantly clays, different layers of clays. And our water rights allocation is a correlative right of half an acre foot per surface acre. The water rights must be obtained within 4 miles of the well, but the acreage doesn't need to be contiguous. You can go to the next slide, please, for the Carrizo. Thank you. For the Carrizo, like Dr. Mace was talking about, we took a little bit of a different approach to it. The sands are mostly homogeneous in our area, so our board saw a really unique opportunity to create a 3D model of the saturated portion of the sands in our boundary, and then assign by a policy decision a portion of that water as a water right for everybody that owns property over the Carrizo aquifer. And we did this in 2003. We implemented the saturated sands aquifer. And if you look at the map there, the cooler colors, they represent the thinner sands of the outcrop area, and the warmer colors represent the deeper, more saturated sands. So those deeper sands have more of an allocation of a water right. Our board has always been focused on the sustainability of the aquifer. So what we did was we set an annual production cap, or what we call the APC, and that's currently set at 16,000 acre feet per year. Now, initially, that cap was set to estimate the approximate annual recharge of the aquifer. Dr. Mace earlier mentioned that our Carrizo allocation, it's being like coupled to the desired future conditions because we have that cap limit. But remember, we developed and implemented this back in 2003, which was like 7 years before there even was a DFC. So back in 2003, our board was really focused just on the directives of Chapter 36, looking at protecting private property rights, balancing the conservation of the development of the groundwater, using that best available science. They're forward thinking, looking back at it now, it does indeed align with our DFCs and the MAGs that were later established. One last unique thing that I'll say about our allocation is that our water rights are transferable within our district. So water rights can be leased or sold or transferred anywhere within our district, which does create a water market. Now, albeit it's a small water market because it's only for properties located over the Carrizo aquifer within our district boundaries, but it is a water market. By rule, we regularly review the model and we post those Carrizo water rights, those calculated water rights on our website. So they're listed by the county appraisal legal description, their GCAD ID, and also by the surface owners' names. So anybody can go to our website and look up and see what your Carrizo allocation is. And that's helpful in our area because the majority of our permits are public water supply holders. And in order for them to get the sufficient amount of water rights that they need for their pumping project, they need to look and find where the Carrizo water right allocations are. And we do have a bunch of information on our website. If anybody wants to take a deeper dive, we've got stuff on our Aquifer Science page. And we also have a YouTube channel. And on our YouTube channel, there is a saturated thickness model video, and it goes over both the science and the policy of it. And I know there'll be more questions later. So the next slide is just my contact information, and you can find me that way. Thanks.
Wonderful, Kelly. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Gary Westbrook with Post Oak Savannah GCD.
All right. Thank you guys for the invitation to participate today. If we can move to the next slide, I'm going to give just a real brief history before we kind of get into this management slide. In 2000, there was published an article in our local paper that there were already 35,000 acres leased for water rights to be used for export. The state water plan already had projects listed, not specifically located, but to supply water to areas west of here. So we're created in 2001, confirmed in both counties in 2002 by about a 2/3 vote. In 2004, early that year, we adopted our first management plan and rules. About a year later, we complete studies and we adopt limits and modify our rules, limits on impacts in deep and in shallow parts of the aquifers. Um, Also, in the fall of 2004, we received our first applications for permits for production and export. Move forward into 2005, and you now come into that time that we all know and love called the Groundwater Management Area and Desired Future Condition process. That becomes law, House Bill 1763. So we functioned prior to that with some limits, and then melded what we were doing along with the other districts into something that we could express similar to what we were already set up to do as a DFC. Move forward in 2018, we institute and adopt the Groundwater Well Assistance Program. We started doing work ahead of projects coming online to export water. Mainly the Vista Ridge project was the first big one there. So we started doing work to identify wells that were going to be impacted and then go out and be proactive in adjusting the depths of pumps so that they wouldn't have problems. 2019 through 2022, we had 3 different efforts where we continued to make our groundwater availability model more accurate by doing several different things. Among them, consideration of well logs as well as pump tests across the area. And then in some areas, the sensitive areas, we actually reduced the grid size from 1 square mile to a quarter square mile for more accurate predictive capabilities. 2019, Robert mentioned a while ago, we came up with the Aquifer Conservancy Program. We began to use the correlative rights that we had, which at that time was 2 acre-feet per acre per year out of any aquifer that you cared to produce from. And so we began to use some of the fees that we collected to compensate landowners to commit into a conservatory or a conservation program so that they would not lease or permit their water rights, so that they would hold them into the future. Currently in our district, exempt wells are pretty much consistent with statute, about 17 gallons a minute, 25,000 gallons a day. We have recently, just last month or a month and a half ago, actually changed that 2 acre feet to something that is a little bit modified version of that. You now can produce up to 2 acre feet per acre per year contiguous for a project, but previously you could produce it from any formation. Now that has actually been changed. And so based on the characteristics of an aquifer, its capacities and capabilities, as well as in Carrizo and in the Simsboro, we now have some thresholds to be met before you can produce. And they range from 1/2 an acre foot per acre per year up to 1.5 acre feet per acre per year, depending on which one of those particular formations that you're talking about. And all that's contained, obviously, in Section 4 of our rules. So we can come back to that later if there's more questions on that. We issue 40-year permits, but they do have a 5-year review process built in. We did recognize historic use, and those amounts were able to be applied for up through 2004. So historic use does exist. Our production fees currently are at 4.5 cents per 1,000 gallons permitted. Our transport fees are at 20.6 cents per 1,000 gallons permitted. Our management strategies include dividing the district into management zones, which recognize individual aquifers, and depths of aquifers can change how we manage within a particular aquifer or formation. We evaluate aquifer impacts with actual water level measurements. We currently have, I believe it's a little over 480 monitor wells in our monitoring system. I mentioned the 5-year review that began earlier this year. The purpose of the 5-year review is to make sure that permits that exist are in compliance with district management goals, whether they be um, state defined like desired future conditions, or whether they be locally defined like protective drawdown limits and other things that we have in our management goals. We also use actual water levels as well as modeling to evaluate these permits. And then based on what we find in the 5-year review, the board can establish schedules for changes to permits, whether it be actually reducing the permitted amounts or maybe setting up a long-term curtailment schedule. We also, and by the way, the slide that we have there kind of references that. And you can see some of the considerations that are going on in one of the areas there. We hope to have all of these evaluations completed in the next 10 days, and we'll begin sending out letters to our permit holders to advise them on where they're at in the process and what we found, so that they can prepare if they need to prepare to come back and discuss that with the district. If you go to the next slide for me, please. We also have developed what we call unreasonable impacts, and everybody on the call knows that we're called to evaluate applications for permits and decide whether or not they cause an impact that might not be reasonable. And so we've actually adopted an unreasonable impact rule. And in that rule, in the unconfined and semi-confined portions of the aquifer, there's a limit of 30 feet or 25% saturated thickness, and that's a both have to be met before we would consider an impact to be unreasonable. In the confined portions, the pressurized portions, down depth portions of the aquifer, where there's a drawdown of greater than 100 feet and artesian pressure reduced at more than 40%. And we want to look at these values as they exist along the property line next to a well or a well project. And so this is kind of our way of defining what maybe fair share would look like. That, everybody talks about fair share, but we're going to stick our neck out and try to define it. And we'll kind of see how that works out. So I'm sure that there's always the opportunity for legal intervention. The last thing I would mention there, if you'll go to the next slide, here's a couple of examples of what we would consider these impacts and how we look at them. You'll notice that in the center of the bullseye there is the Vista Ridge project, and you see the impacts radiating out over the first 7 years of production. And we would apply these metrics to this consideration, and we'll be doing that next spring. And by the way, a shout out really to those folks. They've been very proactive at looking at getting less production in the Carrizo and transferring some of that production to the Simsboro. They haven't filed permanent applications to do that yet, but I'm assured that those will be forthcoming soon. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see what that looks like maybe another 10 years into the future. And then finally, the last thing I'll add is that with not this last session, but the previous session, the Senate bill that passed that required the groundwater availability studies, our commissioners' courts in both Milam and Burleson County have entered into agreement with the district to evaluate the groundwater availability studies for subdivisions. They chose not to opt out, if you would, of the Carrizo-Wilcox part of that bill. And so we do those evaluations as well. And Section 18 of our rules includes some flexibility for folks that are going to come in and look at developments. And we include things like minimum tract size, thresholds that you could meet to avoid certain thresholds of study, if you will. And if you choose to go with smaller tract sizes, well, then there's a lot more study involved. So with that, I'll just kind of back up and wait for questions.
All right. Thank you, Gary, for that great overview. Next up, we have Kevin
Hope
Urbanzik
everybody stayed awake.
with Brewster County GCD. I'll let you take it away, Kevin.
Okay, Adam, thank you. Could we go to the first slide? So I represent Brewster County. I'm on the board. And we have a approach for correlative allocations that I want to describe here. And you see on the map there the different aquifers in the county. I'm really going to focus only on the igneous one, which is over there on the far west side with that blue cross pattern. And then the table you see there is kind of, I kind of refer to it as the modeled water in the bank, what our MAG is, at least from the 2016. This is kind of old, but the data we have. And then the different uses. City of Alpine's the big one. They're exempt actually, but at least they're part of our accounting. And then we have maybe 500 acre feet is the different sort of the water available. We might want to think of it as that way, but that was in 2017. So those numbers might be a little bit different now, but that's a number that I can use to to explain the approach that we use here. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is the slide that Robert put in the presentation at the TAG meeting that he referred to earlier. This is the algorithm, the algebra that we have in our rules about how to calculate a water allocation factor. So we take the MAG, subtract from that existing production, existing use, subtract from that future use, and then divide that by qualified land. So it sounds good, it's black and white, but there's some ambiguities there, what future production means. And then when you say qualifying land, are we talking about the whole aquifer or a specific location? So those are some issues that we're still trying to work out. And I'll admit that we really have only attempted to use this once. Brewster County doesn't have a lot of production permits. And the one time we sort of used it, I'm going to explain in a moment how I guess it is appropriate to say we sort of used it. So if we could go to the next slide. How we applied it, we had an application for a rock crushing plant. The permit applicant had 8,000 acres to claim, I guess. And there was a geologic report and estimate of the water resource to be about 230 acre feet per year. So in the process, there was calculated a factor of 0.028. It's a small number compared to what we saw in Robert's presentation, for example. But basically, that estimate of the water resource was what was used and the acreage to get this water allocation factor. So I call it a local factor because it's not the whole aquifer, it's just that one property. But then if you look at the other production permits, and this illustrates how few production permits we have in Brewster County in the igneous aquifer, there's 4. And they clearly don't have a component of correlative rights in their in their the numbers there. One of them's 2 acre feet per acre per year, and then it varies down to 0.028. So one of them's 2.34. So those first 3 were just values that were determined during the application and the process. And the last one at least had a concept of the correlative rights, but still really didn't use them. So Brewster County is I think what we can take from this, we don't have a lot of production permits, but we could, and that's what I think is really important about getting this algorithm worked out properly. Okay, could we go to the next slide? If we use the qualified land of the whole aquifer and then use the algorithm modified without the future production, maybe taking it out and using it as a target of what we could permit, then you come up with an equally small number or more so. You get 0.01 acre feet per acre per year. So basically that's that balance on the sheet that I mentioned earlier from the MAG minus the production estimate. So we have about 500 acre feet available. We have 560,000 acres for the igneous aquifer. That gives you 0.01 acre feet per acre per year. I don't know if that's really realistic or not, but that's how I see that algorithm as it was put in. And by the way, I had nothing to do with the creation of that algorithm in our rules. I'm just trying to learn how to use it, I guess, is a good way to describe what I'm doing. So we would get a number of 0.01 acre feet per year if we applied it over the entire aquifer. Okay, if we could now go to the next slide. We also have in our rules a new category of permits. We call them limited production permits. And we have more of these than or likely will soon have more of these than we do those true production permits. We created this category in response to the increasing number of permit requests we have for parcels that are less than 10 acres. So people buy 10 acres, or they buy something that's less, or they take their 10 acres and they divide it up. So we're getting an increasing number of applications for these that would normally be considered exempt, except that they're not 10 acres. So we were concerned about that, particularly in the vicinity of Alpine, where there's a lot of subdivisions that are outside of town. And this is where this is occurring. So we have the limited production permit language in the rules now, but it doesn't have any numbers. And we're having a hearing actually tomorrow morning about these proposed numbers that we have. So if the applicant has less than 5 acres, the proposal is to grant them 2 acre feet per year, not per acre, but per year. And if they're between 5 and 10 acres, less than 10, they would get 4 acre feet per year. So that results in if you want to call it a local factor of 0.4 acre feet per acre per year, or larger, depending on how small it gets, less than 5 or less than 10. So we have that category there that we feel is pretty important, because that's really most of the activity we see in permits that are applied for. But with that, also the well owners would have to, they're not exempt now because they're less than 10 acres. The well owners would have to meter and report the water use. Okay, could I see the next slide? Okay, so this is my summary of the range of values that I've discussed here, or that we are considering. If you use my entire aquifer model, the values are 0.01, 0.01 acre feet per year. That equates to 10 gallons per acre per day. If you use what I consider the precedent set with that one production permit with the rock crushing plant, then it would be 0.028 or 25 gallons per acre per day. These are really small numbers, I'm assuming most people would think, compared to their systems, but we are in the desert, and it is the igneous aquifer. One of our permit holders tried to suggest that we use an estimate of recharge that he took from the 2004 GAM that was produced the mag for the igneous aquifer. And if you use that, then that's about 0.034 acre feet per year, or maybe 30 gallons per acre per day. Our limited production permits are at 0.4 or 350 gallons per acre per day. We think that's a generous amount for a parcel that's less than 10 acres. That's what we're discussing and having public comment tomorrow morning about. And then if you look at the Chapter 36 exempt values, that's so much higher. To us, that's kind of fiction, because there's not very many wells in the igneous aquifer that would produce 25,000 gallons per day, but that would definitely be just the upper end. So that's kind of what we're looking at for Brewster County. We have a limited, I would, like I said, I think our mag is probably less than most others. And then, we do have other aquifers in the county that are all different. So we would be looking at those also. So if I could have the next slide. I created my own action figure because at TAG, Robert only gave action figures for Kelly and Gary, and I felt left out. So I made my own, and I did include the canoe. It's kind of funny that he included the canoe in his too. I didn't even think about beer. That sounds great. But I do have the plate of barbecue too, and there's a comparison. So anyway, thank you for the chance to describe what Brewster County is doing.